The door to the 38th floor didn't slam. It clicked. That quiet, controlled kind of click that said more than a slam ever could. Vera Tatum heard it from her desk without looking up. She always heard it. After 4 years of working for Zane Caldwell, she had learned to read the sounds of him the way sailors read weather. The pace of his footsteps across marble, the way he moved through a room, the particular silence that preceded something difficult. This click said he had already made a decision about something, and the decision hadn't been pleasant. She kept her eyes on her screen and let her fingers move across the keyboard with the same steady rhythm they always held. The quarterly compliance audit she was finishing had 17 irregularities buried in it, and she had found all of them before his legal team found any. She was going to let him think about that for exactly the amount of time it took him to pour his coffee. "You're wearing that today," Caldwell said. Vera didn't stop typing. "Good morning to you too. I'm not being critical." "I know you're not." She hit send on the email and finally looked up. "You're being something else." Zane Caldwell stood in the doorway of his office with his jacket already off, sleeves already rolled to the elbow, a habit she had catalogued somewhere in the same mental file where she kept his coffee order and the name of his emergency contact and the fact that he hadn't taken a real day off in 11 months. He was looking at her the way he sometimes looked at a contract he wasn't sure whether to sign, like he was reading something that wasn't written down. Vera was wearing a burgundy wrap dress. She had bought it 2 months ago and left it in the garment bag in the back of her closet because something about it felt like too much. The way it moved when she walked, the way the fabric pulled gently across her hips and did nothing to apologize for the fact that she was, as her mother had cheerfully put it last Thanksgiving, a full woman. She had put it on this morning because she had a presentation at 2 o'clock and she was tired of dressing down for rooms that were going to underestimate her regardless. "The Harwick meeting is at 9, she said. "I'm aware. Your revised numbers are in the blue folder on your desk, not the grey one. The grey one has the original projections, which you're going to want to keep separate. Vera, the contracts from Andover Legal came in last night. I flagged 3 clauses they're going to try to slip past you. Page 11, page 19, and the last paragraph on page 31. Don't let Harwick's people walk you through it. Read it yourself first. Who's taking you to lunch?" The typing stopped. Vera set her hands flat on the desk. Outside, 40 floors below, Manhattan moved the way it always did, without waiting for anyone's particular drama to resolve itself. She could see it through the floor-to-ceiling windows, grey and relentless and completely indifferent. "No one is taking me to lunch," she said, slowly and clearly, the way she said things when she wanted them to land. "Then why are you dressed like that?" She looked at him for a long moment. Zane Caldwell was not a man who asked careless questions. He was not a man who said things he didn't mean. He was the kind of person who chose his words the way a surgeon chose instruments, deliberately and with full understanding of what they might cut. "Because I wanted to," she said. "Is that going to be a problem?" He held her gaze for 3 seconds. Then he picked up his coffee, walked into his office, and closed the door. Vera turned back to her screen and stared at it without seeing a single word. She had not started out as his assistant. She had started out as an analyst in the compliance division of Caldwell Capital Investments, which was the kind of job that sounds important, until you learn that the compliance division occupied half of the 22nd floor and was responsible for the kind of paperwork that no one in the glass offices upstairs wanted to touch. Vera had been 26, fresh out of a master's program at Ohio State, carrying $80,000 in student loan debt and a GPA that her advisor had called frankly alarming in the best possible way. She had been good at the job. She had been better than good. She had found a regulatory gap in one of the company's European fund structures that saved them from a 7-figure penalty, and she had written the memo on it in 2 hours on a Tuesday afternoon and sent it to her direct supervisor, who sent it to his supervisor, who sent it up the chain, and by the time it reached Zane Caldwell, Her name had been removed from the document entirely. She had found out about this the same way she found out about most things in that company, by listening. The compliance floor was one of those places where people talked freely because they assumed no one important was paying attention. Vera was always paying attention. She had not complained. She had not asked for credit. She had filed it away and kept working. 3 months later, Caldwell's executive assistant of 9 years announced she was relocating to Seattle with her family. Vera had applied for the position the same day the internal posting went up, and she had gotten it, and half of her former colleagues had looked at her the way people look at someone they've decided to feel sorry for. That had been 4 years ago. What they hadn't understood, what most people didn't understand, was that being Zane Caldwell's assistant meant being inside the actual engine of the thing. It meant knowing everything before anyone else knew it, and knowing it better. Vera was not a person who needed a title to feel the weight of her own competence. She needed access, and she had it. She had also, somewhere in the long uninterrupted stretch of those 4 years, made the mistake of caring about him. Not in a way she had ever named, not in a way she intended to act on. It was the kind of caring that came from proximity and attention, from knowing exactly how he sounded when a deal was going badly, and exactly how he sounded when it wasn't, from knowing that he kept a photograph of his late father in the bottom drawer of his desk and never mentioned it, from watching the way his whole posture changed when he walked into a room full of people who needed something from him. She had learned him the way you learn something you spend years studying. It was involuntary by now. It was just the shape her attention had taken. She did not intend to do anything with it. The Harwick meeting ran 40 minutes over. Vera could track the progress of it through the glass wall of the conference room. The body language, the moments where Caldwell's jaw set in that particular way, that meant he was about to say something that would make someone else's afternoon very difficult. She watched him navigate it, without appearing to navigate it at all, which was one of the things he was genuinely exceptional at. He let Harwick's lead attorney talk for 6 minutes without interrupting, and then he said something quiet and very specific, and she watched the attorney's expression shift like sand moving underwater. She had an 18-month supply chain analysis to finish, and 2 calls to reschedule, and an email from the building's facilities director about the 22nd floor HVAC system that needed to be routed somewhere other than her inbox, and she did all of it without breaking pace. And when the Harwick group finally filed out at 11:47, looking slightly less certain of themselves than they had on arrival, she had already pulled up the afternoon schedule and identified the 6 minutes between his 2:30 and 4 o'clock calls that could be used to actually eat something. Caldwell came out of the conference room and walked straight to her desk. "Page 11, he said. Indemnification clause. They buried a mutual release in the 3rd paragraph that would have applied retroactively. You caught it before legal did. Legal caught it at the same time. They just weren't going to bring it up until tomorrow." He studied her for a moment. He did that. The studying. She had never entirely gotten used to it. "Have you eaten anything, Ted?" "I was going to at 2:15. Come up to the 42nd. She looked up from her screen. The 42nd floor was where Caldwell Capital kept its private dining room, which was used for client lunches and the occasional board meeting. Vera had been there exactly 4 times in 4 years, always in a functional capacity, never as a guest. "I have the Andover summary to finish," she said. "It'll wait 20 minutes. You have a call at 1, pushed to 1:30. Come up." There was no polite way to refuse that wasn't also a statement, and she understood that both options were statements. She saved her work and followed him to the elevator. The 42nd floor had a wall of windows that faced north, and on a clear December afternoon, the whole of Central Park spread out below in a flat gray-green rectangle, bare trees laced together like the brushstrokes of something barely started. Vera stood at the window for a moment before she sat down, because it was the kind of view that demanded acknowledgement. They were the only people in the room. A staff member brought water and a menu and disappeared with the kind of professional invisibility that people in service roles develop over years. Vera ordered the roasted salmon without looking too carefully at anything else on the menu, and Caldwell ordered black coffee and nothing else, which was exactly the kind of behavior she had been gently fighting him on for 3 years without measurable success. "You should eat," she said. "I had breakfast. At 6 in the morning, it's almost noon." He looked at her with something almost like amusement. "You track when I eat breakfast. I track your calendar. Your breakfast meeting was at 6:15. That's not the same thing." "No," she agreed. "It's more efficient." He was quiet for a moment. Outside, a plane made a slow diagonal arc across the grey sky and disappeared behind a building. Vera thought about the Andover summary. She thought about the call at 1:30 and the 2:15 window and the HVAC email she still hadn't redirected. "Tell me something that isn't about the schedule," Caldwell said. She looked at him. "What? Something not work-related?" He seemed to consider this himself. "A fact, anything." It was such an unusual request that for a moment she genuinely didn't know what to do with it. Vera Tatum was not a person who drew blanks. She was someone who, under pressure, generated more output, not less. But this particular kind of pressure, the kind where someone you have been careful around for 4 years suddenly asks you to just talk, was different. "Red pandas," she said. "Red pandas. They're not related to giant pandas at all. Completely separate family." For about 100 years, taxonomists kept arguing about where to put them in the classification system, and for a while they were just sort of floating, taxonomically speaking, their own category. He was watching her. "They walk with a rolling gait because of the shape of their wrists," she continued, not sure why she was still talking. "They're adapted for climbing bamboo, but the same adaptation makes them walk a little awkward on flat ground. Like they're built for somewhere else and just visiting here." Caldwell was quiet. Then, "Is that how you feel?" "I was talking about red pandas. I know what you were talking about." The salmon arrived. Vera took a long time adjusting her napkin. "You're not invisible here," he said. "I want you to know that. I didn't say I was invisible. The people on the 22nd floor assumed that memo went up the chain without your name for bureaucratic reasons." He said it matter-of-factly, the way he said things he had been waiting to say. "It didn't. I asked my CFO to source it. He couldn't. I found your name in the original file metadata." Vera set down her fork. "That was 4 years ago," she said. "I know. You've known for 4 years. I hired you 3 weeks after I found out." The room was very quiet. 40 stories below, the city went on as cities do, without pausing for the particular gravity of this moment, for the specific weight of 4 years rearranging themselves in the space of a sentence. "Why didn't you tell me?" she said. "Because you didn't need me to." He looked out the window, then back at her. "You already knew what you were worth. You didn't need me to confirm it." What Vera did not know was that the same afternoon she wore the burgundy dress to work. 2 men in a black SUV parked on the street below Caldwell Capital's building were running a very different kind of calculation. Their names were Briggs and Cutter, and they worked for a firm called Oriental Associates, which was not a firm that any legitimate business directory would have listed. Oriental Associates worked in the business of information. Its acquisition, its management, and when necessary, its use as leverage. They had been retained by a man named Fletcher Vane, who sat on Caldwell Capital's board of directors, and had been sitting there for 6 years, while conducting a quiet and meticulous campaign to position himself for a hostile takeover of the fund's most profitable international arm. Vane had a problem. The problem was that Caldwell's assistant had flagged 3 clauses in the Andover legal contract that morning. That alone was not remarkable. What was remarkable was that those 3 clauses had been drafted specifically to create a liability exposure that Vane's attorneys would have used to trigger a forced restructuring, and whoever had identified them had done so without any apparent access to the side agreement between Vane and Andover's senior partner. Briggs and Cutter had been watching Vera Tatum for 11 days. They had not told Vane everything they had found, because what they had found was not what Vane had asked them to look for. What they had found was a woman who got to work each morning before 7, who kept 3 separate encrypted drives on her desk, and who had, 3 weeks earlier, on a Thursday evening when she thought the building was empty, walked into the server room on the 22nd floor and spent 47 minutes there with a laptop she had brought from home. Neither of them had any idea what she had been doing in that room. That was the part that worried them more than anything else. Vera had been in that server room because she had found something. She had not been looking for it. She had been running a routine cross-reference of fund transfers for a compliance review, and she had noticed a pattern. Small discrepancies, individually within acceptable variance thresholds, collectively forming something that wasn't variance at all. It was architecture. Someone had built it deliberately, and built it well, and had been patient enough to let it develop over 18 months, because they understood that patience was the best camouflage. She had not told Caldwell. She had thought about it. She had thought about it for 3 days, turning it over, checking her own work, checking it again. The pattern pointed toward the board. She didn't know which board member yet. She knew the structure, not the source, and she knew that if she was wrong, or if she told the wrong person, the evidence would disappear, and so, very possibly, would her career. She had gone to the server room to access an archive log she couldn't reach through the standard interface. She had been there 47 minutes. She had found what she needed. She had left without telling anyone. She had been sitting on the complete picture for 3 weeks. The burgundy dress, as it turned out, was not the most dangerous thing she had brought to work that Tuesday. She was at her desk at 6:47 the following morning when she became aware of someone standing behind her. Not Caldwell. She knew his approach. This was different. A stillness that was the wrong kind. The kind that came from someone who wasn't sure whether to keep standing there or leave before being noticed. She turned around. The man was mid-40s, well-dressed in the way people get when they want to look like they belong somewhere without belonging there naturally. The jacket slightly too new, the shoes slightly too clean for the weather outside. He was holding a visitor badge and smiling in a way that didn't involve his eyes. Miss Tatum, he said. My name is William Cross. I'm an attorney with Dunmore Partners. We don't have a meeting with Dunmore Partners, she said. No, this is informal. He paused. I was hoping to speak with you privately, if you have a moment. I don't. It's about a matter that I think you'd want to be aware of, regarding some information you may have come across recently. Another pause. In a professional capacity. Vera looked at him for a long moment. She had known this was coming. Not this man specifically, not this morning, but she had understood that what she had found in those logs was not the kind of thing that stayed quiet forever. Information didn't. It moved. It found its way to the people who needed to suppress it, and those people sent other people, and those people showed up at 6:47 in the morning with visitor badges and careful smiles. You should leave, she said, and you should tell whoever sent you that the information has already been transferred to a third party with instructions to deliver it to the SEC and the relevant federal compliance office in the event that I am unreachable for more than 72 hours. Cross stopped smiling. That's a serious claim, he said. It's a serious situation. She turned back to her screen. Building security is on extension 4. I'd use the elevator on the left, the other one runs slow in the mornings. He left. Vera sat very still for 40 seconds. Then she picked up her phone and sent a text to a single contact. It moved faster than I expected. I'm coming to you today. The contact's name was listed in her phone as Aunt B. Aunt B was not her aunt. She was a former federal prosecutor named Camilla Osei, who had pivoted to private practice 8 years ago, and who had been Vera's thesis advisor's college roommate, and who had told Vera, the one time they had met for coffee, if you ever find yourself holding something genuinely dangerous, don't wait. The people who wait are the ones who end up holding nothing. Vera had been waiting 3 weeks. She was done waiting. She told Caldwell at 9:15. She had meant to tell him before she told anyone else, and she had let herself get in her own way about it, let herself loop through every version of the conversation in her head until each one felt wrong. She hadn't been afraid of his reaction. She had been afraid of something more complicated, of being seen, fully, without the useful distance that had made the last 4 years manageable. She walked into his office with a folder and a USB drive and 3 printed pages, and she put them on his desk and stood there while he read. He read carefully. He always did. He read the first page, then the second, and somewhere in the second page, she watched his expression go still in the particular way it went still when he was processing something significant. He read the third page. He set it down. "How long have you had this?" he said. 3 weeks. Vera, I needed to be certain. 3 weeks. He looked at her, and there was something in his face she hadn't seen before. Not anger, or not only anger, but something underneath the anger that was more like fear. "Someone came this morning?" "Yes. And you?" "It's already with Camilla, OC. She's filing the referral today." She folded her hands in front of her. "Fletcher Vane has been constructing a forced restructuring play for 18 months. The Andover contract was the trigger mechanism. If those clauses had gone through, Caldwell Capital's Class B international funds would have been exposed to a liability claim that Vane's offshore entity was positioned to acquire at distressed pricing." She paused. "He would have owned 40% of your firm's most profitable asset by February." Caldwell was quiet for a long time. "You built a dead man's switch," he said. 3 weeks ago, before you told me. Yes, because you didn't know if you could trust me." She looked at him directly. "Because I didn't know who else was involved. I needed to know the shape of it before I handed it to anyone, including you." He stood up from his desk. He moved to the window the way he sometimes did when he was thinking, and she waited, because she had learned that waiting was the right thing when he was thinking, and that interrupting him during it cost everyone something. "The memo," he said finally. 4 years ago. You don't have to. I removed your name from the distribution because I was going to hire you, and I didn't want your existing supervisors to know I was poaching you before I made the offer." He turned around. "I handled it badly. I should have told you. You hired me. That's not the same as an explanation." "No," she said. "It isn't." He crossed the room, not to his desk, toward her. He stopped 2 feet away, which was closer than he usually stood, close enough that she could see the exact expression on his face, which was not one she had a catalog entry for. It was unguarded. She wasn't used to seeing him unguarded. "I need to ask you something," he said. "All right, if this resolves, if Vane is removed and the fund is intact, and there's no longer any reason to be cautious, are you still going to be here?" She held his gaze. "What do you mean, still going to be here?" "I mean exactly that. Are you staying? You're asking if I'm going to resign. I'm asking if you want to." He said it carefully. The way he said things when the words mattered, and he knew they mattered. "You should be running a division. You should be in the room, not outside it. I have kept you in an assistant role for 4 years because I am." He stopped. "Because I didn't want to change what we were. Which was selfish, and I knew it was selfish, and I did it anyway." Vera looked at him for a long time. The city was bright behind him, winter bright, the kind of cold, clear light that makes everything look outlined. "The compliance division has 3 open senior analyst positions," she said. "Yes, and there's a VP of risk operations role that's been unfilled for 7 months because you rejected every candidate your headhunting firm sent you. Also, yes, you rejected 12 candidates, 13, Zane." Something shifted in his face. She had never called him by his first name at work. Not once in 4 years she watched him register it, the small, visible thing it did to him. "The role is yours if you want it," he said. "It has always been yours if you wanted it, and if I take it, then you're not my assistant anymore, you're my VP." He paused. "And I would very much like to have dinner with you, sometime in a capacity that isn't professional, if that's something you'd consider." The quiet between them was a specific kind of quiet. The kind that comes after something irrevocable has been said, and both people are deciding what it means that it was said at all. You should know, Vera said, that I've been aware of your feelings for at least 8 months. He blinked. 8 months, possibly 9. You changed your coffee order in March. You'd been ordering the same thing for 3 years, and then you changed it to whatever I was having that week, which wasn't a coincidence. He stopped. That's circumstantial. You also recommended the Red Panda exhibit at the Bronx Zoo to your nephew in an email last April. I draft your personal correspondence. He looked at the ceiling briefly. When he looked back down, there was something in his expression that was as close to helpless as she had ever seen him. 8 months, he said. I was waiting, she said simply. For what? For you to be ready. He looked at her for a long time. Outside, the winter light held, cold and even and clear. Somewhere on the floors below, Caldwell Capital moved through the ordinary machinery of its day. Phones, meetings, the particular industry of a firm that had survived what it had nearly not survived. I'm ready, he said. Vera picked up the folder from his desk and straightened the edges of it. Then you should know, she said, that I already accepted the dinner, in principle. She tucked the folder under her arm. You asked me once if I ever felt like I was built for somewhere else and just visiting here. He waited. I was wrong about the answer I gave you. She looked at him steadily, with the calm of someone who has stopped performing competence and started simply owning it. This is exactly where I'm built for. She walked out of his office and back to her desk, and for the first time in 4 years, she sat down at it and felt the full, unqualified weight of that. The quiet city moved below her, indifferent as always, not knowing and not needing to know that somewhere on the 38th floor of a building it would never look up at, a woman who had spent years being invisible had just decided, cleanly and without apology, to be seen.